Celebrating anybody's murder is wrong. Understanding why the celebration is happening is also really important. But since we live in a messed up world where everything is political and just about the other side, I mean, everything, if the left talks about it or says it sparked a conversation, then the right must hate it. Cue Fox News' meltdown.
They're now literally cheering for the cold-blooded killer accused of murdering UnitedHealthcare CEO Brian Thompson.
You don't have the right to go out and kill somebody and take, vigilante justice into your hands. So I think it's really disturbing to people across the country.
Liberal wackos are treating suspected killer Luigi Mangione as a folk hero. Mangione isn't a hero. He's a zero.
Those who brush off his newfound folk hero status as wackos are missing the point. Just like the left called Trump supporters garbage Nazi deplorables who cling to their guns and religion, Mangione managed to tap into a deep-seated anger that Americans on both sides of the aisle are feeling. Health insurance costs are outpacing inflation. This chart shows the last 20 years. The green line is insurance. The black line is inflation. It is about as unevenly matched as you can imagine. And the result is American families cannot afford health care. In fact, soaring health care costs are the #1 cause of bankruptcy in America. 62% of the 2 million personal bankruptcies filed this year are because of medical debt. It's not just health care. Yesterday, the Wall Street Journal headlined, "Wall Street is betting billions on rental homes as ownerships slip out of reach." Wall Street's buying up homes and forcing American families to rent from them rather than achieve the American dream of home ownership. So yeah, people are angry, not just about healthcare. They're angry that America now seems fundamentally unfair. These feelings aren't new. More than 2 years ago, we told you there is now an aristocracy in America. That is something that had never existed before. And yeah, the rich should be worried. Just ask the French and Russian aristocracy. It did not work out so well for them. Fighting back against unfairness, even if it is fundamentally wrong in the way it was done, hits a nerve. Murder's wrong, but we should not ignore or vilify or show scorn for the response to it. In fact, Senator Elizabeth Warren told the Huffington Post, this is a warning that if you push people hard enough, they lose faith in their ability of their government to make change. They lose faith in the ability of people who are providing health care to make change and start to take matters into their own hands in ways that will ultimately be a threat to everyone. We're seeing it. It's wrong what happened, but we need to understand why. Many people believe the book Delay, Deny, Defend, Why Insurance Companies Don't Pay Claims and What You Can Do About It influenced the suspect. In fact, the bullets used to kill Brian Thompson had almost those exact words written on them: deny, depose, defense. So, that book is now ranked top 3 on Amazon's bestseller list for nonfiction books. In fact, you might want to look under the tree this year. It is now on the list of the most gifted holiday books this season. The American people are angry, and rightfully so. They feel the system is rigged against them. That's why they elected Donald Trump, and that's why an assassin is now treated like Robin Hood. Begin tonight with Batya Ungar-Sargon, opinion editor for Newsweek. Good to see you. Author of Second Class, How the Elites Betrayed America's Working Men and Women. Judge Thomas Moukawsher, who just wrote in Newsweek what the outcry against UnitedHealthcare tells us about Musk's Doge. Great to have both of you with us. Thank you. I want to start, Batya, with you. You told us that the #1 or #2 issue that you heard from working class voters was health care. There is an anger. Anger sometimes means a warning. Are we now seeing that anger manifest itself in a different way than electing Donald Trump?
Thank you so much for having me, Leland, on the fairest show on television. That opening monologue was so beautifully put, because I think people are really struggling to understand that there are 2 valid impulses here. It is totally unforgivable to murder somebody and take a life. It is also unforgivable that our healthcare system is built on people at the top who are incredibly wealthy, benefiting to the tune of trillions of dollars from the misery of utterly vulnerable Americans, in many cases, who work very, very hard and see their life savings go down the toilet to healthcare costs, who, as you said, go into bankruptcy, who have a credit card debt as a result of not being able to pay for medical expenses that are just totally routine or should be, and as a result can't now get an apartment and are homeless. I mean, the downstream effects of the sickness of the American healthcare industry is absolutely appalling. No God-fearing, civilized society should accept this situation. But like you said, Leland, that does not mean that murder is okay. And I think you really hit the nail on the head. We can be utterly outraged by both of these things at the same time.
Well, first of all, thank you. Thank you for listening. Flattery gets you everywhere. In fact, it will get you invited back. Judge Moukawsher, you make this point, right, that the idea of slashing all government regulation, and you talked about it in healthcare in your piece in Newsweek. I thought it was really important and well written. But if we spread that out a little bit more, is there a warning here for Donald Trump, who feels as he has this mandate to come in and cut all sorts of government regulation that could really work well for working class Americans? It could also not work out so well for them.
Well, that's exactly right. And before I say anything else, thank you very much for having me on. I'm just as excited as your previous guest. And
you're invited back too.
Thanks. So I think that there's a real danger here, because I think what happened with American voters is they saw that the government system was not fixing the problems that they wanted fixed in healthcare. And so in a rebellion against it, they voted for some people who were going to make the problem even worse. And I think that's what we can expect from the whole DOGE concept, because it's about deregulation. It's about getting rid of agencies. The federal government has already pushed most of the regulation of insurance for many years back to the states and just stayed out of the way, even though the federal government does have the power, and certainly the Federal Trade Commission has the power to do something about these ripoffs of bogus denials and the rest of it. And yet, so what we're going to do is accelerate the trend away from doing anything to help these people who are being
fascinating.
Treated.
Fascinating. Batya, when you interviewed Americans about their trials, their tribulations, working class Americans who felt as though they had been forgotten, you picked up on the anger that elected Donald Trump. What mandate did Donald Trump actually get, and how much is their allegiance to him versus this concept that somebody can make their life better?
Honestly, Leland, working class people, I did not encounter anger. I encountered a lot of despair and hopelessness. I think that a lot of the people lionizing the shooter are people who are part of the kind of leftist elites in the way that they talk about it, because I mean, it's such an insult to struggling working class people who have such a heavier burden and would never dream of picking up a gun and shooting somebody over something like this. They felt very, very forgotten and erased and hopeless, like filled with despair. And I think the mandate to Donald Trump was, fix the economy, get the sort of radical left stuff out of our kids' schools and make our lives better. I think people believe that if they are making more money in the marketplace, that they will then be better consumers in this healthcare marketplace, which is effectively what it is. Now, as the judge says, I don't know if that is actually accurate. I hope that Donald Trump is not going to cede all of this to RFK Jr. and instead is going to hear the pleas of the American people that the system needs to be reformed immediately in very serious ways.
Yeah, look, John Kennedy, right? That we cannot save the fewer who are rich if we cannot help the many who are poor. Judge, at some point, there's going to be a trial, and you can tell by this guy having his little outburst as he was led into the courthouse in Pennsylvania that he wants this stage to talk about this issue. doesn't seem at the point where he's going to become some hero that the jury's going to let off. But it got me thinking that if this was a little different situation, if this had been the father of a child who had died because they had been denied health care, it would be a very different case. And there'd be a lot of other conversations we are having now. Prosecutors in New York at some point are going to have to prove this beyond a reasonable doubt to a jury. Is there a chance of jury nullification here based on what we're seeing from the reaction?
What's interesting, you just had the not guilty verdict in New York with Daniel Penny, and some of the people who were very upset about the death of that person in that case would say that this was kind of a jury nullification. I'm not sure if it's true in that case. I can't imagine it in this case, since you have an even more startling video in this case of a pretty cold-blooded act, a very thought-out act. Now, in the case of the father that you mentioned, sometimes people simply lose control of themselves, do something spontaneously.
Yeah, that's not this
problem. That doesn't seem to have happened here.
Okay,
at least
that's a fair point. Batya, I'm going to give you the last word here. There's a second part of people who should understand the anger in the American people. And look, despair that you point out to in many societies, hopefully America is better than this, but has turned to anger very quickly in the past. As I said, and I said it back in 2022, just ask the French and the Russians. When you have an aristocracy and people feel the deck stacked against them, and it feels fundamentally unfair, people fighting against unfairness somehow become heroes. Are you seeing that realization yet by ... the elites that you talk about, of this warning of the danger of making things unfair?
I gotta say, Leland, I don't think it's an accident that this kid is a private school kid who came from wealth, who came from means, who has multiple degrees. That entitlement, that rage, that, how dare things not go the way I want them to? You don't really see that in working class Americans. We are the most amazing country on earth.
Yep.
I just don't feel that violence is there in the American people. I don't. And almost, I'm happy that there isn't more political violence, right? But at the same time, this is why they get screwed again and again and again, and why nobody ever listens to them or feels accountable to the American people, because of this good-hearted nature that they have.
Well, that's where the hope is, right? Of just the goodness of hardworking Americans. And we'll leave it there. Thank you both. We appreciate it. Thanks for watching. Go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.